Let's continue with our this chess scene. Now let's see how we can apply some basic materials and let's render this. So first I'm going to assign the material in the viewport. So here as you can see right now I am visualizing the UV checker pattern, and if you do not want to see this UV checker pattern and if you have your own diffuse material and you want to see your model with that diffuse material applied, you can do so by adding a UV quick shade node. So if I add a UV quick shade, let's add this and let's connect this and hover to the viewport and let's view the result by setting the display flag onto that node. And here as you can see, now we have the UV checker pattern applied. Now that checker pattern looks different, and let me enable the parameter of this node. And this node, it's not actually applying the material, that is just for the UV visualization purpose only, so that onto the texture map here as you can see we are applying the UV grid map that came with the default of Houdini. So we can select this map in here on our own and that will visualize us in the viewport. So it's not going to actually applying the material. Okay, so in here let's pick up our own diffuse map and let me enable this pickup and let's go into the texture folder. And here as you can see we have a lot of these textures that came with that model. So at top we have the chess set board diffuse. Okay, and let me take a look at the directory where we have all of these maps. So here I have downloaded my 3D model. Let's dive inside this folder, and here as you can see we have the chess set board diffuse map, and we also have the normal map and the roughness map, and we also have the another diffuse map that is for the chess set pieces black. So these are that is the diffuse map for our black pieces, and we also have the normals and roughness, and we have another diffuse that is for the white pieces. So which means that we need to apply these diffuse map onto all of these pieces separately because these are all separate materials. So let's see how we can do that. First I'm going to pick up my chess set board diffuse and hit accept, and here as you can see we have applied the diffuse map onto our board accurately, but the pieces are not getting assigned this map accurately because that map is not supposed to be for these pieces because we have separate map for these pieces. Let's separate these pieces from this board. First let me remove this node from here, and if you want to remove the wire you can just pick up this wire and click and that will remove the wire, or you can press and hold the Y key on your keyboard and that will switch you to the scissor mode. And here as you can see my icon has been changed to scissor, which means you can just click and draw and that will remove the wire. So I'm going to remove this wire, and in here first let's create some groups for all of these our different materials. So to create the group I'm going to activate my selection tool. Right now I am on the view tool, so let's activate the selection tool. Okay, so my selection tool has been activated, so now I can click anywhere onto these. I have access to all of these individual polygons, and if you want to select the points just come over here at the top. Here as you can see we have the option to select the primitive, or you can change this to edges. Now I will only be able to select the edges, and if you want to select the points just click on this and that way I can highlight and select all of the points. And you can also change this mode by if you come over here and press and hold, and here as you can see we have all of these different modes. I can change this to point, edges or primitives. So for now let's keep this to primitives, and in here if you double click on any of these geometry and that will select all of the connected pieces of geometry, because right now the board is an A1 connected piece of geometry, so all of my board geometry has been selected. And same way I can click any of these pieces. Let me zoom in here onto this piece. I can click and double click to select all of the whole geometry that is connected, so which means that this piece is a connected piece of geometry, one single connected piece of geometry. And same way I can double click on this knight, double click, and here as you can see I can select all of my connected piece of geometry. And also we have some selection constraint in this selection tool. So if you come over here where it says select, let's click on it, and on this drop down menu we have the option to enable the selection constraint. So in here we can enable the 3D connected geometry. So when that selection constraint is enabled, I can only select the connected pieces of geometry. And here as you can see right now it is very hard to see because of these visualization. Let me see if I can hide the visualization. I think that now the visualization has been gone. And here as you can see I can hover over, and now with the selection constraint enabled, here as you can see that is the selection constraint. So that is the 3D connected geometry constraint. Now I can only select the connected geometry. If I want to select the individual polygons, I can't. If you want to select the individual polygons, you need to first disable the selection constraint by clicking on this option. Okay, let's uncheck this. Now we have disabled the selection constraint. Now I can select the individual polygons. Let's keep enable the 3D connected geometry constraint, and now I can select all of these individual pieces by one click. First, maybe let's select this board geometry, and if we rotate our camera, here as you can see we have some rubber pads. Maybe let's select all of them, press and hold the shift key and click. That will add this newly selection to our current selection. And now I can press and hold the shift key again, and let's add this another pad, and in here let's select this one and this last pad as well. So now all of the board geometry has been selected. Now in the viewport, hit tab key on your keyboard to bring up this our node menu, and in here let's type the group node in the viewport, press enter. So now here as you can see in the node editor we have the new node called group. Let me bring up the parameter of this node, and in here onto the base group we have all of these primitive numbers that are being assigned. And onto the group name, here we are naming the group. Right now it's named to group 1. So maybe let's rename this to our board, because that is our board group. Now we have successfully created our one board group. Now separate all of these black pieces from white pieces, and for that I'm going to first hide the visibility of these primitives so that I can select all of my pieces in the viewport. I can select this. So if I enable the selection tool and maybe let's enable the 3D connected geometry selection constraint, I can just draw, and that way I can select my pieces pretty easily, and same way I can just draw. But sometime you might need to hide the visibility for the better selection or anything. Let's see how we can hide these primitives in the viewport. So we can do this by creating an A visibility node. So let's add an A visibility node in here, and maybe when the node is highlighted into the viewport, if you hit tab and bring up the menu and type the visibility node in here and press enter. Okay, by creating the node in the viewport, that will create a node and assign the group into this node. And here as you can see our primitives has been hidden. I can bring up the parameter of the visibility node by pressing the P key, and here as you can see right now it's actually not using the group, it's actually using the current selection. I can tell because onto the group tab we have some numbers, and I currently cannot see the name of the group that I have created. The name was the board group. So I can create this by clicking on this group I can just remove this. Okay, so all of the primitives has been hidden. So in here I can pick my group, so that is the board group. So now we are using our board group, and now all of these primitives are hidden. So I can now easily just pick up my selection tool and let's draw the selection in here. And into the viewport, let's bring up our node menu, and in here let's type group, and that will create the group onto our this current selection. And in here I'm going to rename this group to maybe a black. So these are my black pieces group, and now let's activate the selection tool again. And in here I'm going to select all of these pieces, and if you want to repeat the current operation, you can just come over here onto these dots, just click on it, and here as you can see we have the shortcut key for the repeat current operation, and that is the Q key. Just click on it and that will repeat the current operation, and that was the group create. And here as you can see we have another group, and that is called the group 3. So let's rename this to white. These are our white pieces. And now let me activate my view tool, and now let's bring up our board. So which means we do not need this visibility node. Just select that node and just delete this. And now we have all of these pieces back, and we have created these 3 groups. Now let's assign our this UV shade node. So let me connect this and let's view the result of this UV shade node. And in here onto the group tab, we can assign the which group we want to assign this UV shade map onto the group. I'm going to type the group name. I'm going to pick my board group because that is the group I want to assign this diffuse material. And here as you can see, only our board geometry has been assigned this diffuse map. And remember, that is just for the visualization, it's not the actual material. So let's create another UV shade node. So I can just select the node, and if you press and hold the Alt key and drag, and that will duplicate the selected node, and that way you can quickly create copy and paste nodes. So let me connect this after that. And in here I'm going to select another group, and for this one, this time let me remove this group. And in here I'm going to pick my this black pieces group, and onto the map let's pick up our map, and I'm going to pick up my this chest set piece black diffuse and hit accept. And now I have this black materials assigned. Right now it is very hard to see, but it's actually there. And now let's do the same thing for these white pieces. So for that I'm going to press and hold the Alt key and drag, and let's connect this. And for this one, let's remove this group field, and in here let's pick up our white pieces, and onto the material, onto this map, let's pick up our white diffuse and hit accept. Let me hide the parameter and let's zoom in. And to actually make this smooth shaded, to hide this wireframe visualization, I can come over here, and in here you can pick up the shading method. Let's change this to smooth shaded. So now I'm not visualizing the wireframe, and here I can clearly see that my map has been applied. Now let's bring all of these into our specific context, the lob context that is specifically designed for rendering. Okay, because currently right now we are in the geometry context, we are working with SOPs. These are actually not the actual materials. We are going to assign the materials in their specific context. For that I'm going to create a lob net in here. So let's create a lob network, and you do not necessarily need to create the lob net in here. You can actually go into the stage context by clicking on this obj level, and that will bring you back onto this scene level. And if you click on it and here we have the stage context. Okay, you can click on it. Now the Houdini switches its interface, and now we are in the Solaris. So in this context, we will building our UST, universal scene graph, and all of the rendering should happen in this Solaris context. So you can come in here onto the stage context, or if you prefer, you can create your own stage inside of this geometry. Okay, remember, because that is just the folder. So in here onto the LoopNet, if we dive inside, and we are back again into the Solaris, but if you take a closer look at the path, here as you can see, we are in the Solaris, but we have created this Solaris network inside of our OBJ and geometry, and we have this LoopNet. So whichever way you prefer, it's all up to you, but the context is the same. So if you right click, here you can see all of these nodes are the same because we are in the Solaris context. So in here, I can import my geometry from this SOP context, because right now we are in the geometry context. And if we dive inside the Solaris, and right now our scene is empty because currently nothing has been imported. So we need to import our geometry in here for rendering. And for that, we have a node called SOP import. So let's add a SOP import node in here. And that will import our geometry from SOPs into Solaris for rendering. So onto the SOP import, I can pick up here onto the SOP path. If we select on this, so in here I can pick up my node that I want to import. And for reference, let me go back onto my geometry level. At the very end, it is a good idea to create a null for referencing. So if I add a null, so the null node is actually do nothing, it's just a placeholder. If I bring up the parameter, here as you can see, we do not have any parameters on it, it's just a placeholder. So let me connect the in here at the very last, and maybe let's rename this to our out for rendering. Let's rename this to out render. And onto the LoopNet, let's dive inside, and onto the SOP import, let's bring up the parameter, and onto the SOP path, let's select our this out render null and hit accept. So now we have the geometry successfully imported into Solaris. So now we can start creating the materials inside of the Solaris. Let's create some materials in the Solaris in the next lesson.